Welcome back to Try Your Hand. Today our project is bookbinding.
Now let's go over the supplies. In the kit, you should have 2 brushes, one larger and one smaller, PVA glue, and a bone folder. Then you should also have a folder as well. In that, you should have a package with some linen thread, a needle, and what's called a headband, which are those 2 little pieces of cloth with a little bit of embroidery at the edge. Then you will have 2 pieces of ivory cover paper. If you don't want to use ivory for like the front and back of your book, you can choose any other paper that you have. You will also have 2 pieces of bookboard, a piece of book cloth, a small piece of cardstock, a sheet of directions on how to glue paper on the bookboard, 24 pieces of paper, and then the directions, which should be brown. There are also some things that you will have to provide for yourself. So those are scissors or a craft knife, a pencil, a ruler, some scrap paper, and if you need, some wax paper, though that's not necessary. Okay, now that we have that, we can get started. First, let's go over some bookbinding vocabulary.
In this context, a folio is one of our book pages that is folded in half.
Once you're done folding the folios, it's time to make our signatures. I took 4 of my folios and unfolded them and then stacked them all on top of one another.
You should then have 6 signatures, and then we will set them aside. And now we're going to talk about the book block. The book block is simply all of the signatures that are then sewn together and then glued. And we will get to those a little bit towards the end. So now we can get started. So again, as I said, we need to make all of our folios. So we need to fold our pieces of paper in half, hamburger style. So what I did was I made sure that the corner edges were all even on each side, and then slid my fingers all the way down to the end and made a crease. After that, I took my bone folder and I made sure that that crease was nicely folded so that it laid as flat as I possibly could make. So now you'll go through your entire stack and keep folding it in the exact same manner. Now that we have all of our folios folded, we can now make our signatures. So our signatures will consist of 4 folios stacked on top of one another. As I stated previously, you make a signature by opening up the folios and then just stacking them. We will do this with 4 folios, and then once the 4 folios are stacked, you can then set it off to the side.
We're going to set the signatures aside, and we're going to take our scrap paper out as well as a pencil and a ruler. What we're doing here is making our measurement, our template, for where we're going to sew the papers together. Your scrap of paper should be from top to bottom 6 7/8 inches. Now, from the top, you're going to measure down about 1 inch and make a little mark. Then from that mark, you're going to measure 1.5 inches and then make another mark. Then from the bottom, you're going to do the same thing. So from the bottom, you're measuring up to 1 inch, and then from that mark to 1.5 inches, and then make a mark there. Then you're going to put an arrow to one of the edges, one of the top or bottom edges, and that where that arrow points, that's going to be your top edge. When you are measuring and marking your signatures, make sure that you're always keeping the orientation correct for all signatures.
So the next thing that you're going to do is to mark off where you're going to be making your stitches to sew the book together. So with each signature, you will open it up to the center page, insert your template, and mark off all those little marks that you put on your template, and you will continue to do that with the rest of your signatures. Just make sure that the edges of your template and the edges of the pages are level.
Next, what you're going to do is you're going to take your needle, so you're not going to thread it yet, and then you open up all your signatures. Make sure that all of the edges of those papers are even. And then what you're going to do is you're going to poke holes with your needle right through all of the pieces of paper in that signature, all in the same spot. And you're going to do that with every signature.
So now we're going to sew all of our signatures into the book block. First thing that you're going to do is to thread your needle. Then you're going to make sure that all of your signatures are oriented correctly. If you put an arrow on the top edge of your pages, then that should be easy for you. Now that you have your first signature, you want to insert your needle through the bottom hole through the spine side of your signature, and you want to pull through. You want to leave about 4 inches of tail on the spine side of the signature. Then what you do is to weave your needle through the holes that you have punched out. You should have the needle coming out on the spine side of the signature on your last stitch. For this first section, make sure to hold down the tail end or else your thread will just fall out. You also want to pull the thread very firmly through all of the holes. So just make sure that all the stitches that you do are tight so that your pages aren't loose at the end. So now we are going to sew the second signature onto the first one. We're going to put those 2 signatures together, and we're going to insert our needle through the first hole of the second signature and pull through. Again, you want all your stitches to be quite tight. Not too tight, you don't want to rip the paper, but tight enough that they're really close together. Then you're going to insert your needle through the second hole and pull through to the spine. From there, instead of sewing again in the second signature, what we're going to be doing is inserting our needle through the second hole of the first signature. So what that means is that you'll have a stitch that's horizontal on your spine. So then you'll have your needle through the center of the first signature. You want it to go back out to the spine, so what you'll do is insert your needle through the third hole of the first signature and pull out again. So your needle should be out by the spine. Then, because you want to sew the 2 things together, you want to insert your needle in through the third hole of the second signature, and that will also have a little horizontal stitch going across your spine. So now you're in the center of the second signature and you want to go back out to the spine. So you will put your needle through the fourth hole of the second signature to have your needle out by the spine again. Then what you want to do is to tie the 2 ends of your thread together, making a knot, and that will secure your stitches that you did, and it'll also secure the signatures together. So now we're going to sew the third signature onto our book block. It's very similar to the way that we sewed the second signature on. This time you're starting from the bottom. So again, you insert your needle through the bottom first hole of this third signature. Then we insert our needle in through the second bottom hole of the third signature. Then through the second hole of the second signature, being in the middle of the second signature. Then you insert your needle into the third hole of the second signature, so that you're out by the spine, and then you insert your needle through the third hole of the third signature, and then from there you just put your needle in through the fourth hole of the third signature, and then from there it gets a little different. So since we don't have a thread end like we did previously to tie our 2 threads together, we have to make a different kind of knot. So what we do is we insert our needle in between the 2 signatures, catching the previous stitch that we did and pulling through until there's a small loop. Then what you do is you put your needle in through the loop and then pull, making that knot. Now you're ready to sew on signature number 4. The process for that is exactly the same as for signature 3. And you keep on doing that until you don't have any signatures left. So this is what your finished products should look like. Now we are going to be using the glue. This step is quite simple. So what you're going to do is take your Tupperware of glue. You're going to open that up and take your small brush, dip it in the glue, and then slather the spine of the book as generously as you can with the glue. You want to catch those little thread ends in with the glue as well. You don't want thin layers for this. You do want it to be quite thick. So don't be afraid to really put on that glue on that spine. So once you're done with that, you want to set this aside and let it completely dry. This glue does dry clear, so you can tell when it is done. It is now time for the book cover part. We're going to take the book cloth and we're going to flip it over to the paper side. Then we're going to measure where the center of the book cloth is. I did this with a ruler and just marked it very lightly with pencil in the center. Then I drew a line. If you do this, you want to be very careful with how hard you're pressing because you will be able to see the pencil mark through the other side if you really press down hard with that pencil. Next, we want to take our little piece of cardstock. What we're going to do is to glue that in the very center of our book cloth. So we drew a line, we know that that's going to go there, but then you also want to center it on the top and bottom as well. So I just measured how long it was and made little marks where it should sit. Then I put some glue on with a tiny brush and glued it on. So once I glued that down, I measured 1/4 of an inch from the sides of the little cardstock piece. The reason we're measuring that is because those lines are going to be where I'm going to glue down the thick cardboard pieces that are going to be our covers. Now I'm going to be putting some glue down on the book cloth, and I'm going to be putting that glue not on the cardstock, but on the other side of that little line that we just drew. This glue is going to adhere the book cloth to the book board. So now I'm going to be gluing the book board onto the book cloth. I'm going to line up the edge of my book board to the little line that I made with pencil, and I'm going to also make sure that the edges are nice and even with the cardstock piece that's in the middle. So once I glued those down, I can then flip up the book cloth to cover the inside edge of my book board. I also went in with the bone folder just to make sure that the book cloth is nice and smooth. So what that means is that I flipped it over and made sure to run my bone folder over the cloth, making sure I have any air bubbles and things like that out of the book cloth. Now it's time to do the cover of our book. We have these little pieces of ivory paper. If you have a different pattern paper or a different color paper that you would like to use for this, that is perfectly fine. Go ahead and do that. You just want to cut it to these exact dimensions. So now to get started with this, what we do is we take our glue and we glue the entire piece of paper. So we just slather it in glue. Make sure that you have some sort of like scrap pieces of paper under this portion of your project. The reason for this is just to protect the surface that you're working on, but also to help not have little glue marks on your book paper that's going to be covering up the cardboard. Once you're putting glue on that paper, you want to move that paper onto a different surface, and we're going to be gluing that paper onto our book board. The directions say that you want about 1/4 of an inch around the edges of your book board, you do want this paper to overlap with the book cloth. So once you have measured out or eyeballed where you want your book cloth, you just want to set it down real nice and then smooth it on as best as you can, either with your bone folder or with your fingers. Once you have the whole thing glued down, you want to go over the paper with your bone folder just to get those air bubbles out. You don't want to press too hard or else you'll leave marks on your book board. But the best that you can, smooth out any of the air bubbles is good enough. This is the part where you would maybe want some wax paper just to kind of protect the paper from the bone folder itself. But, it's not necessary. So once you feel like that's in a good spot, we are then going to be re-gluing some of that edge, and then we're going to be folding over the edge around the book board. You will want to clip the corners of this paper. There is a little sheet in there that shows you how much to clip off. You don't want to clip off too much because you do want those corners of the book board to be protected. So now you just fold over the edges. It doesn't matter which way you do it. So once you're done folding it over, you want to go over it with the bone folder, making sure it's all smooth. Now you will be repeating that process with both sides of the cover. So the next step is to glue on the headbands of the book. So those are those two little pieces of cloth with that little embroidered edge. So what you want to do is you want to glue it so that the embroidered side, like the little bumpy side, is facing the pages instead of like the spine of the book. So in order to attach the book block to our cover, we are going to glue that first page to the covers. So what I did was I used the big brush, the big thick brush, and I put a bunch of glue onto my book board. Then I put the book block, I made sure that the spine was lined up with the middle of the cover, and I put my paper down, inching it forward so that only like about 1/8 of an inch of that folded over paper on the cover was showing on all sides. And then I smoothed it down with my hand and of course with the bone folder itself. Once I was happy with that, I did the exact same thing on the other side. So now that you're done gluing down your pages, we want to make sure that we are able to open the book still. So of course, right now with the glue still wet, of course you can open the book, but once it's dry, you will have difficulty if you do not do this step. So while the glue is still wet, you want to open up your book as wide as you can so that the pages, because the glue is still wet, can move to where it's then comfortable opening. If you don't do that, what will happen is that the pages that are glued down, will start to rip by the binding, and that's not good. Okay, so once you do that, you want to take your bone folder, and with the corner of it, you want to make a little crease where the book board ends on the spine of your book. And that's to make the little indent that you see on most books. After that, in order for it to dry and to make sure that it's stuck together, the directions ask you to leave it under heavy objects for a few hours. So I left mine for a few days and it worked perfect. You also want to put a scrap piece of paper right at the very beginning, at the very end of your journal here, so that any excess glue that gets expelled by the pressure put on by the heavy objects doesn't glue your pages together, and it's just on this scrap paper. Okay, so now you are done. You have a journal that you sewed together all by yourself for you to use. Okay, so I hope you really enjoyed this project. If you don't know, our next project is leatherworking. So we will be making a small little card holder. So if you're interested in that, don't forget to sign up. All right, we'll see you later. Bye.